So we are again switching to English because we will be having a foreign speaker. That's our guest. I would like to introduce our friend. So he is the one who was among the individuals who started Agile as a thing. The author of series of books and topics related to the subject. American computer scientist, Dr. Alistair Cockburn.
Hello
Welcome.
there.
Our heartily welcome to you.
How are you doing?
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here. I am very happy to be here.
And we are very, very happy that you are here with us.
Yes, we are.
You're the headliner today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So from where are you connecting?
It's particularly special for me to see that you're able to make this conference happen. And that's what it makes it doubly exciting for me to be here. So greetings to all of the viewers, and but especially thanks to all of the organizers for finding a way to make this conference happen.
Thank you. We appreciate your lovely comments. And
yes, basically, as we know, you agreed to attend our offline conference, so we had to see you offline. But anyway, we're happy that you kept your promise to join us. That's very, very special to us. Before you start, I would like to have a quick guide for your listeners. We won't have a Telegram bot for this speech. Our technicians will send you a link to YouTube channel. Please follow this link to Slido service. There you will find an ability to ask Alistair any questions related to speech, or as you know, there's a format, Ask Alistair Anything. So basically, when we get to Q&A session, we will go through the questions, and to define which questions are the most interesting to you, the answer for which you would like to hear, please vote for the questions, and please indicate your first and last name so that we could address you.
Yep.
Basically, that's it. No more time to introduction, and we are eager to hear your speech.
The floor is yours, and we are kindly asking you to start with the presentation by sharing your screen.
Very good, thank you. I'll just say one or two words, then I will hit the share screen button.
Awesome.
And
as I said,
thank you. So often the talk is like 45 minutes and then 15 minutes for questions. And we decided this time that maybe we wanted more time for the questions. So I shrank the talk down to about half an hour. So it'll be about a half an hour of talk, and that should leave plenty of time for the questions. So when you're listening, please pick some questions. For this talk, instead of just talking about the Heart of Agile, which of course I will do, it seemed it would be interesting to pick up themes that are current in today's Agile world. And so I picked out 4 topics to start with, and that may help you think of some questions also. So with that, I will share my screen here. Always a scary thing. There we go. 1 second here, playing with hide floating controls. Always takes me a minute to get that right. All right. So this is Agile in 2022, and leaving some space afterwards for Ask Me Anything. Let's get going. If we say Agile in 2022, we have to look back a little bit. And a person called Pierre Hervouet made this beautiful recap of history, in which he basically had this lovely picture that from, roughly speaking, 1991, which is when I got started with the theme, up to 2001, we had a growth of what would be what we call lightweight processes, in which we find Scrum, extreme programming, My Thing, Crystal, and so on and so forth. And so what you see was that in 2001, when we wrote the manifesto, we had about 10 years of experience that we were packing into that thing, the manifesto. So for people like me, the writing of the manifesto was a summary of 10 years of work. It wasn't something new, it was something we had all been working on for, some period of time like that. And then we see since 2001, since writing the manifesto, an absolute explosion of methodologies that came about. And there you see a picture created by Craig Smith showing them all. And the point that Pierre Hervouet was making was that in 2015, I basically found a way to collapse it back again into these 4 words, which I call the Heart of Agile. So 2015 was another consolidation point. But now it's 2022. And so the question is, okay, we've been living with this for 20 years. How would we frame this question, what is Agile? Someone says, what is Agile? And I no longer look at the Agile Manifesto for the definition. I did that for 10 years or more. But because Agile is being used in so many different contexts, I went back to the dictionary definition of Agile, which, we knew what the word Agile meant when we chose the word. Ability to move and change direction quickly and with ease. I don't need any more than this. This is perfect. If someone says to you, what is this Agile thing? You can say, the ability to move and change direction quickly and with ease. Now, why do we care about that? And that's because the world is changing so fast. So there's this acronym that floats around called VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So that's the world. The world is, as we know, changing so fast, you literally can't tell when you get up in the morning what's going to happen to your master plan. Because the world is changing so fast, everybody in the world, every organization in the world, every team in the world, every industry in the world needs this ability to move and change direction quickly and with ease. So this ability, agile or agility, is important for everybody. Now that's really important when we talk about getting Agile out of the software world and how and why I created the Heart of Agile. Now, it's very, very important that everybody see this, that Agile doesn't mean twice the work in half the time. I'm quite sorry. Jeff Sutherland wrote this book. Now, he helped write the manifesto. He knows what he's talking about. He chose the worst title possible because you don't want your bosses thinking that you're going to do twice the work in half the time. This is exactly not what we want. It's not that with Agile, anybody thinks any faster, nobody types any faster. Agile means more value from the same work. We've learned how. With the same people, the same teams, the same tools, the same speed of work, the same thinking, the same typing speed, but we've learned how to work in a way that from the same amount of work, we get more value. So if you ever hear the bosses say twice the work in half the time, you can stop it right there. It's a terrible thing that bosses love to hear. They're going to get twice the work in half the time. And what does that mean for the employees when your bosses say, hey, everybody, now you're going to do twice the work in half the time? It's not the case. So I want to say that. And there's this great cartoon that shows you, this from Dilbert, and Dilbert says, Agile programming doesn't just mean doing more work with fewer people. And his pointy hair boss says, find me some words that do mean that and ask again. So this is what we're trying to avoid. Okay, so I'll continue, but you know that this is the thing. We've learned better ways to work. Here's the problem that we're solving just around the question of Agile and agility in the 2020s. The Agile frameworks, even Scrum, which is very simple, Scrum, Safe, Disciplined, Agile, so on and so forth. They're complicated. They have a lot of vocabulary, and they don't apply widely. What we need is a simpler, more general, and more powerful way for people to enter. And so that's why in 2015, I introduced the Heart of Agile with just these 4 words. And we're going to look at what they are just a little bit here. Collaborate, deliver, reflect, and improve. You don't need more than these 4 words. This is it. This now can apply to every person, every industry. It's very easy to get started. And let's just look at these for a moment, okay? Start with collaborate. Think about it on a team or in an organization. To the extent that you collaborate better, things will go better. To the extent that you collaborate worse, things will go worse. But this is obvious. This is obvious. But traditionally, we don't put money and time on that word collaborate. And so for me, that's the first word. Improve collaboration, put time, energy, money on it. And we'll see that when we get to the theme of scaling Agile and remote work, distributed teams. This word becomes super, super, super important. And it's not obvious. You don't just put screens in front of everybody and then magically they collaborate, okay? The second word is deliver. And deliver, we've got delivering in little pieces, getting feedback, getting value. It's part of that thing, getting more value from the same work. So as you improve the ability to deliver and get feedback, everything will improve, and you can change directions, that agility thing we were talking about earlier. Then reflect and improve. Reflect means periodically stop working on the main initiative, I will say, and think about what's happening and look at the data, check the emotions, and then decide where you need to improve. Most organizations in the world never take time to stop and reflect. That's your moment for that agility to change directions and make adjustments. So these are super basic things. And I have this phrase here, brilliance in the basics, which I found that the US Air Force uses this phrase because they have so many different kinds of airplanes in the US Air Force that they can't train the pilots to be perfect on every single cockpit they're going to get in. So they train the pilots to be absolutely brilliant in certain basic things in every cockpit they ever step into. Brilliance in the basics. It's a great phrase and it applies. So if you ask me any question about how to get better, I'm probably going to say, well, collaborate better, deliver in slices and get feedback, pause and reflect, and then decide what to improve. Anybody can do those. And as you get better at those, you can start to address any situation and ask any question and just get better. So those are the basics. And that's why I call this the Heart of Agile. Now, it's relevant that since I came up with that about 7 years ago now, some of the old timers, people who were doing Agile in the 90s, before we called it Agile, people who've been doing this for 20 years, now introduce Agile using these 4 words rather than the Agile Manifesto, because the Agile Manifesto looks complicated by today's standards. In this, you only need 4 words and away you go. Now, the thing is that this isn't a process. This is like a book. When you open a book and it's got chapters and it's got topics, if you open this up and you look behind each of these words, you find many, many topics. And it's not my intention in this talk to go through all of those words. There are other talks online where I go through those sectors quite carefully and show you the elements. But that's not my purpose here today. I just want to show that really almost any topic that you bring up, you can find it connects into one of these words, and it's interesting to see that connection and follow out. So if someone says, hey, lean Kanban, I say, oh, well, that's the internal flow model. That's part of deliver. We look at the internal flow, the queues, queue management, work in progress, right? So all of those words come in there. If we look at modern product management, pivots and deliveries, that's in deliver to learn, so on and so forth. There are new topics. We found by looking at this particularly, and I'll talk about up in the collaborate section, you can see culture is a top level topic, and there we've got politics, rewards, bonuses, talk about silos, leadership. We bring in solution focused psychotherapy down in the reflect and improve sections, and so on. So these are topics, and I'm not going to spend time there. The important part is it's simple. It's just 4 words. Just collaborate better, deliver, reflect, and improve. Okay? Now my colleague, lovely Argentinian lady who lives in Brussels or in Belgium right now, came up with this metaphor of a compass. And the reason for this is that we are so used to looking for processes that even Scrum, which isn't a process, they now call it a framework. So it's a framework for a process. And everybody tries to make everything a process. And we want to get away from the word process completely. The heart of Agile is just 4 words. For me, it's a reminder of things that we could think about. Life is complicated. Let's just pick one of these 4 words as the word to talk about today. So Sole introduced the idea of the heart of Agile as a compass, where you choose in which direction to advance the conversations, just as when you use a compass when you're hiking, you don't go in all 4 directions. That's not useful for a compass. You choose for now, which is the direction for now, that will advance you toward your goal. So having that is really, really useful as a metaphor. And here we see, if you're going to take a screen snapshot, this is a good screen snapshot to take. There you see key topics that she picked out for each of the words. So under the collaborate, you really have to talk about trust, right? If you want to collaborate better, you have to work on trust. Trust is related to culture, and there we'll get to rewards. So this is, we see right away, this is not a process. If I look at the Scrum Guide or Scrum at Scale or any of the other ones, they don't talk about executive bonuses. They don't talk about how can you increase trust. But if you want to increase collaboration, you have to get into the questions of employee evaluations. Are you evaluated on the quality of your collaboration with teammates? You have to get into executive bonuses. You have to take on fear, trust, culture, all of those things, everything that has to do with collaboration. There was one company, and I got this question, what do you do if all the different role specialties belong in different sections, you're distributed, they're all like co-located in different places, and all of the annual evaluation metrics are on how well you do your particular job. So there's no incentive. In fact, there's negative incentive to collaborate with other role specialties. And I go, you know, there's just a limit to what you can do in that world. You really have to change the structure of the organization in order to increase collaboration. Inside of delivery, there's 3 things we mentioned: the internal flow of decisions, of work, this idea, delivering slices to increase value, and then delivering to learn, incremental delivery. There's a financial model that shows that this works. Inside of reflect, there's the question of, do you pause, how long you pause, do you have data? There's tons and tons of data on all software systems these days, but also check everybody's emotions. Emotions are a form of data. And just then decide what's going on, orient yourself, what are the topics that are hot topics, and then improve everything in baby steps. And I'll talk specifically about that because that's super important these days. So here are 4 topics and 2 sort of conclusion steps that I chose to pick out. And of course, in 2022, the riddle of remote work. We really understood, I would say, up until about 2018, before remote work got too big, we understood about co-located teams, how to make them work, how to set up the room. It was really good. Since COVID and full distribution, the topic of remote work is very hot. And to be honest, we're still kind of learning. I saw a podcast the other day of someone who's been doing full remote for 2 years, building companies. It was really wonderful him to talk about how to build trust right from the very beginning with new employees, onboarding, all of the things they do. But we'll talk about that. The second one is scaling. The topic has been a topic for a while now, but I want to talk about Agile as we defined it, as we discussed it in 2001, was oriented toward teams. So it's a kind of a mid-level granularity. It's not a single person working. If you've got teams, and you can be teams of like, I don't know, 3 people, you could take teams literally up to 200 people, and it still qualifies as team-based work. But the topic is when you go to full organizations, it's a different topic. So that's another one. Leadership has changed in the last 5 or 8 years. I'm actually in the middle of writing an article on leadership in the 2020s. If you look around, there are many initiatives, topics, words, synonyms for different kinds of a much more, I will say, softer, much more inclusive, a gentler leadership, listening leadership. So I'll talk about leadership. And then I absolutely have to show you the magic of incremental change, which we have learned from the solution-focused psychotherapy realm. Yeah, we apply it to everything. And then the final thing is prioritize attitudes over structures. Start small, keep it simple, and that will close out the talk. So just here's the riddle. There's this graph, and this graph I wrote in the late 1980s as a thought experiment. And on the vertical axis, we have the effectiveness of communication between people. And then on this axis to the side, we've got the richness of the communication channel. And at the top of the curve is 2 people at the whiteboard. 2 people at the whiteboard use facial expressions. They use their bodies like this. They interrupt each other. They change what they're saying based on what the other person is doing. They have the whiteboard. They speak and draw at the same time, right? You have many sort of modalities of communication available at the same time. You put the 2 people on the phone, and now you lose the whiteboard, you lose the facial expressions, you lose that synchronization between drawing and speaking, you lose the proximity, you lose a lot of information that's used in trying to convey some idea. If we follow the black curve, you have 2 people on chat, real-time question and answer, but you lose the vocal inflection, and you know how fast chat can get out of sync. Now, the red curve was me exploring what happens if you can't ask questions, and so it's either archival for future, like a month from now, or you're going across time zones. And now we have video as at the top, so you can take a video recording of 2 people at the whiteboard, and you can use that to convey into the future to somebody else what happened in that discussion. So that's the most effective way I know to put something in time, box it. Is 2 people discussing at a whiteboard, and what's the worst of all possible is just a written document where you have no feedback whatsoever. That's important because remote work as we have it today, it's good in that it allows work to be decoupled. The bad is that we don't have all of those things when people are together, all of these body movements that increase trust, believability, and the adjustment of phrases and ideas that allows for real interesting creativity. So, I don't like it because I'm really focused on communication effectiveness, but I do like it because we can decouple work. So the punchline on that is remote work is here to stay. We have not found all the new work habits that are needed, but there are people exploring. It is not a matter, as you well know, of just putting a camera in front of somebody. We have to, what we're doing, if you look at them, all of the mechanisms that people use to increase the effectiveness of remote work is getting up on that black curve higher and higher. increasing the modalities, the richness of the communication channel, so you approximate two people at the whiteboard as close as you can. So whenever you're looking at remote work, look at this curve, think about how do we approximate being physically in the same room with the things that increase trust as well as movement of ideas. What I want to say about the organizations is it's a different game. Organizations are a different game. And so I picked an analogy some years ago. It's like working with water versus working with ice. You know, water, there you see a picture of a kayaker moving very quickly. We can get a team of 6, we can get 2 teams of 10, we can get 10 teams of 10. There are ways of working with teams. They know what their mission is. They know what their priorities are. And there are lots of techniques of getting them to do very fast, efficient communication between each other, change direction, be super effective. That's not the top question when we have organizations. And here I have a picture of a bar that was probably a vodka ad, and ice is just different. It's hard. You can do different things with it. You can't build a bar out of water, but you can out of ice, right? The dominant question with organization is, what are our priorities? You have many departments and many initiatives and many executives probably looking at their bonuses and their power. How are they going to increase or keep power, right? Very, very sort of egotistical, solo things affected by the rewards. The Agile Manifesto doesn't approach any of those topics, right? So it's just different. There's nothing about the Agile Manifesto that helps organizations with all the people fighting for power and choosing a priority. It's a different game entirely. So yes, we would like the organization to be agile. No, we don't look at the Agile Manifesto for ways to do that. Those are separate topics, okay? And you guys can pick up on some of these if you have further questions in the question section. Leadership is super interesting these days. The article I'm writing is lessons learned from tango. And one of the originators of modern tango, Ciccio Frimboli, said around 2018, he said, in the olden days, like 10 years ago, like 2008, he said, if I wanted my partner to put her foot in a particular place, I made sure that her foot went to that place. It was my job as leader to make sure her foot went to that place. He said, I was wrong. There's better ways to lead. It's 2018. He said, now I have an idea. I initiate a move. And then as soon as my partner starts to move, I have to figure out where she's going. And then I make sure that I get there with her. So I become the follower. Now, this is not, you know, in an organization, it's not that the executives are necessarily going to follow every employee, but what Ciccio was doing, he says, I am listening to what she's doing, to what my partner is doing. So we find in host leadership, guest leadership, situational leadership, parallel leadership, there's all kinds of leaderships out there these days. The essence is on listening. Part of that, and for me, the end target is a thing I call guest leadership. And that's when everybody in the organization or family or whatever feels free to take initiative in different situations, and they trade off leadership based on what's needed, who has expertise. And so here is this picture that I love. There was a beach and some family was having trouble. Somebody on the beach, not the lifeguard, got the idea, and they made a chain of 80 people to pull the person in, the family in from way out there without the lifeguard. That is guest leadership in an absolutely perfect example. Now, if we ask for organizations, how hard is that to achieve? It's very hard. We're back to the reward structures, we're back to trust, we're back to having a feeling of ownership, et cetera, et cetera. But for me, this is the end game, and I found a few companies, smaller companies, where they really have this, and they're very, very, very effective. So when you look at leadership days, it's about listening, very much about listening. But what we really want is everybody to feel free to take a leadership moment and have that move around as expertise. This is the incremental change. This is something that you can take home and start doing right away in every part of your life, every topic in your organization. I call it the Delta technique, and it comes from the solution-focused psychotherapy world. And it goes like this. First of all, you ask, what are your best hopes? That would be a 10. Just ask. That's directional. You're actually not going to try to get there. You're just identifying what good looks like. Then you say, where are we now? We're at a 4, 3, 6, whatever number. We don't try to jump all the way to 10 from 3, but rather you look at, gee, 3's actually not that bad. Something is working. Let's find all those things that are working a little bit. And instead of making major changes, we'll just dial up those things that are already working. Okay? Good. So those are your assets. And then the last thing, you just say, how can we get a tiny bit further? Just go from a 3 to a 3.5, a 4 to a 4.5. Don't try to jump from 3 to 6. And so when you do this tiny, tiny, tiny change, you ask, what would it look like and feel like if we were at a 3.5 instead of a 3? What would we notice? And then you'll start noticing those things, and then you can dial them up. So it's a very good positive feedback mechanism. You can apply this to any property you like. Collaboration, guest leadership, delivery. You can apply this to anything that suits you. So winding everything up, but one of the things that I guess I hope you get from this talk is I didn't talk about structures. This is not a process. This is not a structures thing. When I look at years and years of projects, success comes from improved attitudes more than from new structures. There are a few structural changes, particularly around the reward mechanisms, but mostly it's just, does anybody want to collaborate? Now, the problem is that executives can buy a new structure with money, right? They have $10 million, buy a new structure, install it, tell everybody to do things. But they can't buy improved attitudes. So this is the difficult part, is attitudes take actual hard work. This is a nice one, again, if you want a screen snapshot. This is kind of a synopsis of how do I get started. Collaborate, deliver, reflect, improve. That's nice, 4 words. Can you say anything more? Yeah. What you can do personally, yourself and in your team, is increase the quality of listening. Remember, I talked about listening a lot. Deliver something small and soon. Pause, check your data and emotions, and then make small changes. Yeah, so that's everything that I have on the sort of the fixed side of the equation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now as a tip off to the AV people. Here we go, stop share, boom, and back we get.
Hi there.
And by the way, that wasn't bad because I couldn't see your countdown timer when the screen was being shared, and I see I have 45 seconds left.
Okay.
What an internal timer.
Yeah, but we have lots of questions for you, so we can use that time for them. And yeah, basically we are switching back to questions. We will be showing only you for this part, and we will read the questions. So basically, we will start with the question which has the most votes yet. It's the question from Yevgen Krashenko. The question sounds like this. Would you still recommend a use case scenarios in 2022? Please share your insights, how they can be used. And if you still recommend, well, basically your guide to writing effective use cases nowadays.
Yeah, that's a great question. As many people know, I wrote this book called Writing Effective Use Cases. It was really a great book, popular, used around the world. And I still love that book. And no, much though I love use cases, it's really hard to use use cases these days because they require people to sit and think. I hate to say this. but people really don't have the time, the energy, the focus to sit and think these days. Sad that might be. Use cases are still good for, I would say, I like them. Let me say, I go into organizations and I see suffering because the programmers say, literally, I've had programmers say, if you don't come in with a user story from extreme programming, I won't talk with you. If you come in with anything but a user story. And there's a problem in that the business analysts and the business side really have trouble making a coherent sort of a picture of what they're going to build with just user stories, and the use cases solve that. And the testing department suffers because, again, they get these isolated stories that come in, and it's not clear how they fit together to make a coherent testable unit suited for delivery. So the use cases are really good for that. And then the question is, okay, so what do we do about that? And I'm able, because I'm an expert, to write use cases really lightly, quickly. What I would say, Eugene, as a thought, if you write use cases, I use them kind of as a narrative because I understand them. I'll actually use a person. Let's say Jenny is taking an order online. And so I will literally say, Jenny does this and somebody orders this, and I'll tell the story, and then I can use that structure and say, but this and this. And this now reads more like a story and less like a formula. It's less general, but it will convey that connection that you could then cut up. I have been wondering since the arrival of user stories, I keep thinking they shouldn't work, and I keep wondering why they do work so well. And it's because we deliver and get feedback. So if you're doing user story deliver feedback, many of the mistakes that you would make, mistakes of omission, you can find them quickly and then add them later. So that's suboptimal. But the hard part literally is getting anyone to sit down and think for 2 days. And I'm not talking about think for 2 months. I'm saying it's hard to get anybody to think for 2 days these days and have a conversation and put this together. So very good question. Thank you. Do we have the next question?
Yes, we are.
And
Thank
everybody,
you
please be going on Slido and so that we get a bit of questions.
Yeah. So the next one is from Michael Bibic. Could you please tell us the most memorable case in your practice when you or your colleagues regretted that they used agile methodologies? Were they?
Yeah, and I'm thinking it's a great question because I use Agile almost all the time. So when you're saying that was a apropos the answer to Eugene, sounds like someone has their microphone on there. Apropos the answer to Eugene, the question is, when did we get hurt from people not thinking ahead when they should have thought ahead? And I just have this one story. I helped start the International Consortium for Agile, and so I was kind of the sponsor and the owner, and I'm like the product owner, and not the product owner, I'm the sponsor, and the problem was that I was living in Utah and the developer was in Cairo, so 9 hours different. And also their habits were that, of course, being Muslim, they took Friday off instead of Sunday off. And so the problem with the time zones is when I got up on Thursday morning, the programmer had already gone home for the weekend. So Wednesday was the last day that I got work from this person. And so it was on a Thursday, I get up and one of our customers' very first delivery says something about he couldn't remember his password or something, so he couldn't get in to pay us for something we had done. And I asked whoever was in charge of the product owner, like, this is when we get to why should they have written the use case? They had not created a reset password button. and the programmer had gone home for the weekend. So there I am on Thursday morning, not able to support a client till Monday, so locked out for 4 days. He couldn't pay us. When I asked the product owner, the person who was in charge, he said there wasn't a user story for reset password. So there's an example of, in a use case, if you were writing a use case for login, you would of course think about reset password. It's natural. It was an error of omission because the user story structure doesn't encourage all of the exception kind of investigation. And we literally, lost money for 4 days because they didn't have a reset password. So that's a personal example from my life where somebody says, somebody else, right? I'm the sponsor, I can't touch it. Somebody else says, we're using user stories and we didn't have that story. So yeah, sorry, that was painful for me, I can tell you. In general, mostly what I see is where somebody, there's just a failure so huge where somebody just misbehaves so badly that you can't say, gee, that's a fault of Agile, really. But that one I gave you was literally an example of people not thinking ahead in fairly simple case, and it cost money. So there we go. What else do we have here?
Well, we have, thank you for answering this one, of course. And we have the next one from Alona Zalenka. What advice would you give for facilitating a productive reflection workshop, especially when people don't want to collaborate?
Ooh, man. When people don't want to collaborate, there's just not a whole lot you can do. So the question, no, I have been in situations where there was a lot of tension in the room, and notice now that my experience primarily is when we're co-located, because when you're co-located, there are things you can do in the room to change the mood. You can make things fun. There's certain kinds of games. You can introduce hats. You can have people wear hats. You can have, you can yourself be, as a facilitator, you can yourself be a little bit, let's say, funnier than otherwise. And so the good facilitators, when they go into a room that's full of tension, this is what they're after. They're after getting people to lighten up the mood. And now when you ask the question, all right, but we're all distributed and remote, it's just a lot harder to get people. So the thing about it wouldn't matter if you say a reflection workshop or any other meeting when the people don't want to collaborate. It's difficult. One trick that I've used when I've gone in was, and again, because this was in the time of co-location, so you'll have to think about how to adjust this for using Mural or Miro or distributed tool, is to take a timeline and say, okay, let's say we haven't had a meeting for like 2 months, which is quite a long time. And I'll draw a line, that's the calendar, and the mood is happy and sad. And I ask people to draw their mood over the 2-month period. So they might start off happy, and then they got sad, and they got a little bit happier again, and maybe they got sad. And so the people draw this, all of them. So it's a chance to let people express themselves as to what it is that's bothering them. And then we look at events, what was a high point and what was a low point, and we can just mark those. Now you don't you don't have to deeply analyze those, but that takes a while to do, and it's a way for people to just get their emotions out about the fact that they were unhappy. So they have a permission to do that. And then what I've done, again, and was to ask the people to say, okay, draw a picture of any picture, any flavor you like, get into groups of 2 or 3 of what this place could look like if it was working well. Any sort of a picture that you like, and then they all draw the pictures and you compare. So what we're doing here is we're just moving the mood, getting them to exchange, their emotions. Timeline, they get to be heard, what went wrong. and then to shift into a positive way what could be before going into anything that would be sort of a structural improvement kind of a thing. So very, very tough. But when people don't want to collaborate, I think lightening the mood, allowing a certain time for people to vent their emotions is what I have. Very good. I'm seeing some votes now. I'm seeing only sort of like, 1 and 2 votes. So if you vote, you can actually push the topics up. So highly recommend that people out there go and vote.
Yes, we did, and we should repeat that. Please vote for the questions which you would like to hear, because we have limited time. And also, I would like to remind that you would really want to be not anonymous and enter your name. I can't tell you yet why, but it would be important in the end. So the next question is from our anonymous user, yet anonymous. Is it possible to plan Scrum sprints for data science project where the majority of the work is a research and experiments without any time limits?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I used to be a researcher, and from one week to the next week, there was so little motion. Let's say I will put it this way. In Scrum, they have a notion. It already presupposes you're on a development project in which there's something you're going to literally deliver, and that you can grow your way to it. So really, Scrum came from software, and that would be true. If we show, take a look at something like research, or something where there really isn't anything big that happens from one week to the next, or whatever, I would shift the word, and instead of saying a deliverable product and a sprint, I call these planning horizons, right? So you have a planning horizon, and the planning horizon, I think if we're talking about things like research and whatever, should be 1 week long, 2 weeks, not a thing on the calendar, but a week, we all know what a week is. But instead of looking at a delivery, it's literally a question of what am I thinking I'm going to get done this week? So in other words, it's not a promise for delivery, but it's an orienting thing where we get to then announce to the group what it is that we're going to be working on. And we help each other during each day, if anybody has a question or a problem that somebody else can help with, that we can do that at the daily meeting. And at the end of the week, at the beginning of the next week, really, it's a kind of a reality check for what I thought I was going to get done versus what I did get done. And is there any learning from the difference between what I thought I was going to get done and I did get done? And we use that in the improvement section. So there's a kind of there's a morale boost from sharing what it is you think you're going to do, and there's a learning from checking at the end of the week what really happened. So that's what I've got on that question.
Yes, we can go to another one. The one which was pushed up. Any techniques that can improve the collaboration between the distributed teams that you can suggest?
Yeah, there was a wonderful podcast, and I don't have the URL for it right now. It's a guy, Maxim Wheatley, I think is his name. And he's been doing fully distributed for 2 years, working with China and all the rest. And it all comes down to trust. One of the things he says is that there's a limited value if all meetings have an agenda and you stay on the agenda. In fact, that it's really good that the team has a chance to meet and work together outside of the directives of the mission. And so I have friends in Latin America, and they literally have had, parties. And I guess you would do this on work time, but literally they'll have dance parties, there'll be DJs, there'll be, drinking whatever they're drinking at that time of the day, socializing, absolutely pure social events. In our group, and again, this mostly comes from Latin America, where they have this very strong need for personal connections. We have animals. So this is my Asterix. So we'll have a session, and I'll be there with Asterix like this, and Sola has a giant heart that she brings with little hands and so on. And so we're always trying to lighten up the mood. If you think about what allows people to relax and say anything, it's the fact that they're already been in some other social situation with people, and then they can relax and be more themselves. So all of the ideas to improve the collaboration really have to do with increasing the sort of the sense of goodwill. We in our Heart of Agile group start every phone call with what's called a mood check-in, and it can be very short. It just is like, hey everybody, I'm tired, I'm drinking coffee, I'm waking up, or somebody says it's end of day, I'm really hungry, but I'm here, I'm in. So it goes, I'm hungry, but I'm in. I'm waking up and I'm in. And that's a way of just allowing a small amount of time to enter as a person and get there. So that's, you look online, when I said things are moving, we're seeing ideas, but that's what those are largely about. What do we have next?
Next, we have a question from Igor Fedoseev, which been pushed up. There are two general ways to plan a sprint: velocity-driven sprint planning and capacity-driven sprint planning. What is your favorable?
I wish that he had added a bit more words, because I'm not sure what velocity-driven and capacity-driven. I am a favor, and so maybe this is the velocity-driven. I'm in favor of a trick, wonderful trick, documented by Kent Beck and Martin Fowler in one of their early extreme programming books. It's absolutely genius, and it's called Yesterday's Weather. So this is probably velocity driven or something. And the idea there with the name Yesterday's Weather is in most parts of the world, you can predict today's weather by just saying it's the same as yesterday. You get up and whatever yesterday was, it's going to be today. So you're wrong sometimes, but then you're probably right the next day. And so you can do very well just by yesterday's weather. Applied to, let's say, software development. Let's say you're using story points. That's fine, whatever you're using. How much you deliver this upcoming sprint is probably going to be pretty close to whatever you delivered in the last sprint. And now this shortens your sprint planning time a lot, because you don't have to get really detailed into like every single story and what it means. Assuming there's some similarity between the requests that come in, if you delivered 15 story points last time, you're probably going to deliver 15 story points this time. So in addition to saving a lot of time, it also solves a different problem, which is that programmers are eternal optimists. And they go, well, everybody is, but I'll pick on programmers for a moment. That we think we can do 30 points, and they deliver 15. And so the next time they said, yes, but there were extenuating circumstances. This time we'll deliver 30 story points, and they deliver 18. And they go, yeah, but there was something strange that happened this time, right? And when you do yesterday's weather, you get rid of all of that argument. You say, we're going to do 30 story points, and you do 15. Then you don't have any choice. You take 15. And if you do 18, that's great. If you do 20, that's great. And then the next time you'll get to do 20. Now, when we look at velocity versus capacity, if I was going to adjust those two as I understand them, now it's, 3 people are going on vacation. You don't take the same number. You maybe adjust it for the fact that 3 people are on vacation and stuff like that. We have national holidays that'll take, some days out of the sprint. You can adjust the numbers, but basically yesterday's weather gets you out of a bind. Yeah, that's what I have. I see we have about 10 minutes left. We've done a lot of questions, actually. That's really great.
Yeah, let's try to cover as many as possible. The next one is from Kate Hobick about sharing your vision on agile trends for the next couple of years and any predictions along that.
So Kate, I wish I could. I am absolutely horrible at predictions into the future. My job in life is to describe what I see happening, like I'm an anthropologist. And just to give you an idea of how bad I am, I thought that writing a manifesto was a pretty bad idea back in 2001. I was going, I'll go along. I'm not a fan of manifestos. And then I was wrong. So, I don't trust my prediction. I did give the topics that I think are interesting and relevant, which is, well, so first of all, Agile is fully outside of software by now. It's being used in social impact projects, in government projects, in church projects, in home projects. Agile transformation is itself not a software project, it's a cultural project. So the first thing is Agile is being used everywhere. It's global, it's distributed, leadership is changing. So those are the topics, but I don't. I would say those are the topics to look for, and in particular, I'm fascinated by leadership changes these days. So the people who are what we would call more humble, but by that I mean better at listening, better at including other people, growing toward that guest leadership. I'm seeing this happen again all around the world. I'm afraid that's all I have on the Agile trends.
Well, thank you for sharing your insights. And we have one more from Sergei Kuzmenko. There's a quotation, probably one of your texts. We get things wrong before we get things right. And the question, do you have a general rule that helps avoiding or minimizing mistakes before they actually happen?
That's so funny. And that is exactly a quote from, well, good for you, Sergey, if you got that from my old 1993 IBM article. But I may have been quoting somebody else at that time, so maybe the quote's floating around. So this is really interesting. I'm just going to see, because we do make mistakes, and a lot of mistakes, and Agile is oriented toward detecting mistakes quickly, right? And then now the question is, can you reduce the number of mistakes? So yes, now if we look at a pendulum that goes back and forth, or a tension, it used to be in the old days that the executives truly believed that you could sit in a room and think through all the scenarios and write it down correctly, and then do exactly that. And then 2 years later, when you produced your product or system, the world would not have changed, and your analysis would have been correct. And you got everything right. And all you had to do was think a lot in a room. And they would literally think for 3 months, 6 months, 10 months, year and a half. I've seen a year and a half where people would sit in a room and think very hard for a year and a half, and then try to get something right 3 years later. Now that never worked back then, and it for sure doesn't work now because the world changes too much. And the other side is in the early 2000s, at the beginning of the Agile world, a person that I knew wrote in a discussion group, if you have to plan, you're not Agile enough. And that made my blood run cold, because that was inside of my constituency. The idea being, and this is the problem with the user stories, is that the idea that you could literally just only respond to external events. So somewhere in the middle is what we're looking at. And I have this notion that when you get everybody in a room, you have to have more than one person, because you're bouncing ideas off of each other, and you're trying to trigger that creative thing where I see something that you didn't see. You're trying to create that and guess into the future. And this is where use cases come in. They require days of thinking, which is very hard to do these days, but you can get days of thinking. And there's a planning technique that I learned years ago that I still use. I call it project planning jam session, a project planning jam session. or blitz planning for short, but really it's a project planning jam session. And you get everybody together, and then you make a list of all the things that everybody has to do. And I use cards, paper, and then you make a timeline and you see what can be done in parallel. And the point is that the people contribute. Oh, if you have to do that, then we also have to do this. Oh, I forgot this. And how long does this take? And then you argue about those things. And this takes a half a day. It can take between, 2 hours and 6 hours would be long. So it's less than 2 days. But typically 2 hours will get you something pretty good. So in this, what you're looking is for a brainstorming mind meld between different people, getting the current understanding of the world down in front of you, looking at it, and trying to find things that will hurt you later. So I taught this to a company like 160 people, and then about almost a year later, the bosses came to one session I was teaching this in, and I go, what are you guys doing here? Like I taught everybody this thing back then. And they said, well, we weren't really listening very much because we were too much focused on Agile, but we got hurt later by things that we could have seen at the beginning. And so we're back to learn the technique. So there's the answer. But I think, if you do 1 day, 2 days, you're kind of at the limit. I'm going to ask our facilitators here because we've got 3 minutes left and I'm seeing some questions coming in. Can maybe we just take one more question?
Yes, we can have one more and maybe even two, but that's it. So are you ready to answer for two maybe?
It depends. Probably my answers take too long, so let's just go for one.
Okay, then let's go for one. Then the latest one, which came with the most votes right now, it's from Nadia Stasiuk. The question is, it happens that management transforms story points into hours to count costs. What do you think about such calculations?
Well, management does that anything, right? Now there's an old rule that metrics are useful for improving things, but the moment you use metrics to evaluate and reward people, the metrics become useless because they'll get into a problem. Yeah, story points are supposed to be an internal guidance system for any team. They're not supposed to be for metrics. Between one team and another team, they'll evaluate stories differently. They'll have different velocities. Now, in a per team basis, you can translate those into hours or days, but you better not do anything with that other than very general planning. If there's a reward based on the number of story points delivered, people will, of course, inflate the size of the stories in order not to get hurt or in order to get a reward. So, and if management converts these as a punitive metric, saying you're not as fast as another team, or you're not as fast as you used to be, or you're not as fast as we would like you to be, then again, it loses its value, and people will start to change the way they estimate in order to either gain the bonus or to not get hurt. So it's a really bad idea. And yeah, I don't know what to say, because since they've ever been invented, management has tried to use them as some kind of a punitive metric, pressure on teams, and it backfires terribly. So yeah, that's what I've got there. We are at the end of time here. I'm open now. Would you care to say why we wanted the names of the people? There was a reason. Can you say that?
Yes, actually, now we can tell that. Basically, the reason why we were asking to upload for the questions so that they get up and have a chance to be answered is because we have a surprise. The surprise is that we are giving away the book from Alistair, with Alistair's autograph, for the question which Alistair liked the most. and we wanted to give you an option to bump your question up. The reason why we did that in the end, because we really wanted you to ask the question which touch your heart, and we got lots of questions like this, I suppose. Are we correct, Alistair?
Yeah, I have to tell you, those were great questions. I'm glad we had lots of time. They were very thoughtful questions that illustrated something. But I'll tell you the one that touched my heart. That was a bit unexpected, and the phrasing was perfect. From Michael Bibic, could you please tell us the most memorable case in which your practice, but you or your colleagues regretted that they used agile methodologies? It forced me to think. It's a great question. I had to be honest, and it illustrates something about all of this. So this was a wonderful question. I'm really delighted if Michael gets a copy of the book. But all of the questions were good, but that one was really just sweet.
Well, yeah, there were lots of questions. Well, we will ask Michael to contact us and leave his contact so that we would be able to send the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I feel sorry that I didn't ask the question. Maybe
Well,
I
you
wanted
should
the
have.
book as
All
well.
of us will notice.
You kept a secret with the
Well,
surprise.
I'm sorry, but that's the way it goes. Well, Alistair, we are really thankful for you being with us. We are really thankful for your support. We really want you to see you someday offline, maybe on our next MultiConf, if possible, or
In Kharkiv.
maybe one of them, yeah, in Kharkiv. So
I have been in Kyiv a few times. I've been in Lviv. I can say "Дякую."
Дякуємо.
My "Добрий ранок" and "Дякую" are my two.
That's some great
Ukrainian.
pronunciation and the
Yeah.
meaning
Thank you.
behind as well.
and "Где туалет," which I always save up for a key moment. It's all my Ukrainian. So next time I come to Kharkiv, we can add some more phrases for me.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
We're glad having you today, and maybe it's time to say goodbye for the time being, and we will continue to the end of our NIX MultiConf the second day.
Yeah, but we are for sure not saying goodbye. We're saying see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Bye.